We live in interesting times for the headlines. 5 people were killed and dozens were injured after a powerful earthquake hit the southern Philippines. Pro-democracy lawmakers are dragged out of Hong Kong's legislature by security guards after they heckled the city's pro-Beijing leader for a second day running, the latest outburst of political rancor in the strife-torn city. Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced what he said was a great new deal for Britain to leave the European Union as leaders gathered in Brussels for talks. And the International Monetary Fund sees the global economy in a synchronized downswing, and financial markets need to act now to head off the growing risk. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us. Now to the news. Five people were killed and dozens were injured after a powerful earthquake hit the southern Philippines, according to authorities today. The 6.4 magnitude quake struck the Mindanao region on Wednesday night, reducing dozens of houses to rubble in the southern third of the Philippines. On Thursday afternoon, authorities said 5 people were killed and 53 injured, mainly in a cluster of small farming towns. 3 people were killed in landslides, while another was crushed by the collapsed wall of a house. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council said the 5th suffered a fatal heart attack. No fatalities were reported in Mindanao's major cities. Now, local authorities had earlier told AFP 3 children were among the dead. The Philippine Seismology Office has recorded more than 300 weaker aftershocks in the area since the big quake. But authorities said they don't expect the death toll to rise significantly. The Philippines is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, an arc of intense seismic activity that stretches from Japan through Southeast Asia and across the Pacific Basin. Roughly 90% of the world's earthquakes occur in the belt, which is also home to more than 450 volcanoes. The seismic region stretches along the Pacific Ocean coastlines, where the Pacific Plate grinds against other plates that form the Earth's crust. Meanwhile, Malacanang pledged to extend help to the victims of the deadly earthquake that rocked parts of central Mindanao on Wednesday night, killing at least 5 people and injuring many others. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo said the palace would direct all concerned government agencies to render immediate assistance to quake victims. A magnitude 6.4 or 6.3 earthquake rattled North Cotabato on Wednesday night and was felt in nearby provinces. The strong quake caused serious damage to several buildings and infrastructures in the affected areas. Local chief executives from quake-stricken areas in Mindanao were prompted to order the suspension of classes on Thursday. In a press conference, Mr. Panelo said the palace was saddened by the unfortunate incident, and he assured the victims that the government would exhaust all efforts to alleviate their suffering. In the meantime, he also advised the public to avoid false information about the earthquake.
We're sad to hear of the earthquake and the outcome to the victims of the earthquake. We would like to express our sympathies. The President has directed agencies to assist in whatever way they can do to alleviate the suffering of these people and to undertake any rehabilitation activities relative to whatever damages that the residents in Cotabato City.
In related news, minor cracks were found at the City Hall building, while portions of the ceiling of 2 shopping malls and several other structures collapsed as a result of the 6.3 magnitude earthquake that rocked parts of Mindanao on Wednesday night. City Mayor Ronel Rivera said the latest earthquake aggravated some cracks at the main City Hall building due to previous temblors, but the entire structure generally remains safe. He said the assessment, which covered the city gymnasium and 10 other structures, was conducted by personnel of the City Engineer's Office, led by Assistant City Engineer Emerald Signar. The cracks were found at the stairs of the City Hall and the City Agriculture Offices Training Center, which has been undergoing retrofitting. Dr. Agripino Dacera Jr., head of the City Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office, or CDRMO, said the mayor has tasked the office of the building official to conduct inspections on private buildings such as hospitals, private schools, shopping malls, and other commercial establishments, while the Department of Public Works and Highways was assigned to cover government buildings, including public schools. In other news, President Duterte sustained minor injuries after figuring in a motorcycle accident on Wednesday, according to Senator Bongo. Senator Bongo, his former assistant and close aide, earlier told reporters President Duterte had crashed and complained of hip pain after the accident, but was not hospitalized. Take a look. Now, he said the president was...
Hindi maiwasan. Talagang magmumotor talaga yan. Sabi nga niya sa akin, hindi ako mabubuhay kung hindi ako magmumotor. Hanapin ng katawan ko yung pagmumotor. Kaya ngayon sabi ko, hanap tayo ng scooter. Mayroon yung ginagamit ko motor, papasok sa mga nasunugan. Magmotor na lang tayo, papasok dun sa mga squatters area para samahan mo ako. Ano na lang tayo, mag-scooter dahil hindi mahirap dalahin yung scooter. At his age, 74 years old. Diba? Siyempre medyo prone na po yan sa mga bali-bali. So ako I'm concerned po sa ating Pangulo, and let's hope and let's pray na sana po walang pilay ang ating Pangulo at wala pong nabali sa kanyang katawan.
Senator Bongo later said the president was now resting in the palace. He also said the president would have a checkup later to determine if anything was broken. Secretary, President, and Presidential Spokesperson Salvador Panelo said President Duterte was trying to park the vehicle after driving around a courtyard, adding the leader was now resting at the palace. In other news, Indian President Ramnath Kovind arrived at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport on Thursday afternoon for his 5-day state visit upon the invitation of President Duterte. He was on board a chartered Air India flight that touched down in Manila at 4:24 p.m. President Kovind was welcomed by Chief of Presidential Protocol and Presidential Assistant on Foreign Affairs Robert Borge, Department of Health Secretary Francisco Duque III, DOH Undersecretary Lilibeth David, Department of Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Enrique Manalo, Philippine Ambassador to India Ramon Bagaching Jr., Pasay City Mayor Imelda Calixto Rubiano, Manila International Airport Authority General Manager Edmond Real, Indian Ambassador to the Philippines Jaideep Mazubdar and Mrs. Parvati Mazubdar, and the Defense Attaché Sandeep Marathe. He is the third Indian leader to make a state visit here since the establishment of the Philippine-India bilateral relations in 1949. The DFA earlier said Presidents Kovind and Duterte will hold a bilateral meeting on October 18 in Malacanang to discuss areas of mutual interest, including political, economic, cultural, and people-to-people engagement. Now, during his state visit from October 17 to the 21st, President Kovind is also set to meet with members of the Indian community in the Philippines. He will also attend events organized by the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce, Incorporated. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced what he said was a great new deal for Britain to leave the European Union as leaders gathered in Brussels for talks. "We've got a great new deal that takes back control," he wrote on Twitter, calling on lawmakers in London to approve the agreement at a rare Saturday sitting of Parliament. Chief EU negotiator Michel Barnier said, quote, "We have managed to find solutions that fully respect the integrity of the single market." One immediate hurdle is opposition from Johnson's allies in Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, or DUP, which preemptively rejected the compromise. The agreement would see the British-ruled province remain under EU customs and value-added tax rules, and the loyalist DUP announced that it cannot support it. It also said there was a lack of clarity on sales tax. A DUP source said after Johnson's announcement that the party's position had not changed. Under the measures to replace the so-called Irish backstop in the previous failed agreement, the plan would see Northern Ireland remain British legal territory, but trade under EU regulations. This is intended to prevent the return of a hard border with EU member Ireland. But because it would involve some customs and tax checks with the rest of the UK, it raised the hackles of the DUP. But Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the main opposition Labour Party, said the new deal should be rejected by MPs. Meanwhile, the president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, said that Brussels had come to an agreement with Britain on a Brexit withdrawal agreement to be presented to EU leaders. He said, "Whether there is a will, there is a deal. We have won. It's a fair and balanced agreement for the EU and the UK. And it is testament to our commitment to find solutions," Juncker tweeted. "I recommend that EU endorses this deal," he said, referring to the European Council of the Leaders of Member States that was to meet later Thursday, local time. In other news, pro-democracy lawmakers are dragged out of Hong Kong's legislature by security guards after they heckled the city's pro-Beijing leader for a second day running, the latest outburst of political rancor in the strife-torn city. Chief Executive Carrie Lam tried to deliver her annual policy address and failed twice. Heckling started even before she entered the assembly room. Pro-democracy lawmakers who form a minority of the pro-Beijing legislature shouted her down. One even used a pocket projector to broadcast protest slogans behind Lam as she stood on the podium and later donned the face mask of Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, after failing to deliver the address for a second time, Mrs. Lam left the building and her office announced that she would release a pre-recorded video of the speech instead. Mrs. Lam was unable to give a State of the Union-style policy speech on Wednesday after pro-democracy lawmakers who form a minority on the pro-Beijing stacked legislature repeatedly interrupted her. Instead, she was forced to deliver the address in a pre-recorded video. Now, it is the first time in Hong Kong's history that a chief executive or governor has been unable to deliver the annual address in person since the tradition began in 1948. The chaos inside the Hong Kong legislature comes after a summer of huge and increasingly violent democracy protests as popular anger explodes over sliding freedoms and living standards following 2 decades of Chinese rule. Now, hours later after that, the leader of the group organizing the march was rushed to hospital after an attack by suspected government loyalists. Police inspected the scene where Hong Kong prominent activist Jimmy Sham was attacked. The leader of the group organizing the upcoming march was rushed to hospital after an attack by suspected government loyalists. Take a look.
4 or 5 people beat one person. I just saw it. And when I sat inside, so I listened voice of someone beating. So when I come out, they almost going. When I come out, I just see the person lying on the floor, and they are going.
I'm very shocked and angry because we think that in Hong Kong everyone should have the freedom of expression, should not be cheated by the violence act, so that we think it is unacceptable. So that I think the motive is to make the Hong Kong people afraid and don't show up in the Sunday's protest and even in the coming election to cast the vote. I think more people will come out because Hong Kong people have shown their courage, and we do not afraid the violence by the government or by the child member. But I'm afraid that the confrontation, the violence between the protester and the police will increase because we don't trust the police.
The Civil Human Rights Front, or CHRF, said he was set upon by a group of up to 5 hammer-wielding men in the Mong Kok district of the Kowloon Peninsula, and he was left with head injuries. They added that he was conscious as he was taken to hospital and was in a stable condition. The attack on Mr. Sham came hours after the territory's leader suspended her annual address after being heckled in Parliament. In other news, Catalan President Kim Torra called for an immediate halt to the violent clashes that rocked Barcelona for a 3rd day, warning they were harming the image of the separatist movement. Take a look.
La protesta va ser sempre.
But as the evening wore on, the situation quickly became chaotic, with hundreds running through the streets, hurling broken paving stones, torching cars, and occasionally stopping to take selfies in front of the burning barricades. Until now, Torra has not made any comment on the violence which erupted on Monday, just hours after the Supreme Court handed down heavy prison sentences to 9 Catalan leaders for their role in the failed independence bid of 2017. U.S. President Donald Trump defended his decision to pull U.S. troops out of Syria as the House of Representatives overwhelmingly condemned the move in a rare bipartisan rebuke. A total of 129 members of President Trump's Republican Party joined Democrats as the House denounced the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from northern Syria in a 354-60 vote. The joint resolution called on Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to immediately halt military operations against Kurdish militants in Syria.
When you make a statement like that, it's so deceptive. Just the opposite of a green light. First of all, we had virtually no soldiers there. They were mostly gone. Just a tiny little group. And they would have been in harm's way. You have a massive army on the other side of the border. But more importantly, I didn't give them a green light. And if anybody saw the letter
which can be released very easily if you'd like. I could certainly release it, but I wrote a letter right after that conversation, a very powerful letter. There was never given a green light. They've been wanting to do that for years, and frankly, they've been fighting for many, many years.
He was insulting.
Now, in a sign of President Trump's deteriorating relationship with Congress, where the House is conducting an impeachment inquiry, Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer walked out of what they said was an acrimonious White House meeting with President Trump. Senator Schumer said President Trump had called Senator Nancy Pelosi, a third-rate politician, while the Speaker said the President had experienced a meltdown.
He was insulting, particularly to the Speaker. She kept her cool completely, but he called her a third-rate politician. He said that there are communists involved and you guys might like that. I mean, this was not a dialogue. It was sort of a diatribe, a nasty diatribe, not focused on the fact.
He couldn't handle it. He just couldn't handle it. But 2-1, the Republicans voted to oppose what he was doing in Syria. He just couldn't handle it, so he kind of engaged in a meltdown, and we were trying to get the answer. What is your clear plan that this resolution asked for how we fight ISIS? It was very sad. It was very sad. What's really sad about it is I pray for the president all the time, and I tell him that. I pray for his safety and that of his family. I think now we have to pray for his health, because this was a very serious meltdown on the part of the president.
Leader Schumer said he called you a third-rate politician.
No,
you said you were
sympathetic.
A third grade. Thank you for clarifying.
Grade. And I said, I wish you were a politician.
What did you
Now, President Trump then took to Twitter, accusing Pelosi of having her own meltdown, while adding that the Democratic leader needs help fast. There is either something wrong with her upstairs, or she just plain doesn't like our great country, the president wrote. Faced with mounting bipartisan criticism in Washington over the abrupt pullout of U.S. forces from Syria, President Trump denied he had given Turkey's President Erdogan a green light to launch operations against the Kurds.
And you know, Turkey, just so people remember, Turkey is a NATO member. We're supposed to get along with our NATO members. And Turkey is a NATO member. Do people want us to start shooting at a NATO member? That would be a first. And that's all involved having to do with NATO. Yeah.
Mr. President, you're going to be seeing House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today. How do you anticipate that conversation?
Well, I'd say this. I think that she's done this country a tremendous disservice. She's created a phony witch hunt, another one. First one failed. They're all failing. This one is just absolutely crazy. All you have to do is read the transcript of the call. Read the transcript. This is a open and shut, simple case. They're desperate because they know they're going to lose the election. They're desperate to do something because they know they're going to lose the election. This administration has created the strongest economy in the history of our country.
Meanwhile, Turkey's week-old offensive against Kurdish-controlled areas of northeastern Syria has displaced more than 300,000 people, according to a war monitor on Thursday. Rami Abdelrahman, head of the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, said the jump in the number of people forced to flee was due to a fresh wave of displacement over the past few days from areas around Tal Abyad and Kobane and in Hasakeh province. He said, quote, most displaced people tried to move in with relatives in safer areas, and some were sleeping rough in orchards and others in some of the 40 schools that have been turned into emergency shelters. Turkey and its Syrian proxies launched a broad assault on Kurdish-controlled areas on October 9 after U.S. troops pulled back from the border and started withdrawing from the northeast altogether. Dozens of civilians, mostly on the Kurdish side, have been killed since the start of the offensive, which Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has refused to halt despite mounting international pressure. Meanwhile, Qatar defended its close ally Turkey's controversial operation against Kurdish forces in northern Syria, saying Ankara had acted against an imminent threat. Turkey has helped Qatar weather the effects of a 2-year regional economic embargo led by Riyadh over claims of support for Iran and Islamist extremism denied by Doha, but Ankara has faced widespread condemnation for its deadly incursion, with the U.S. imposing sanctions on prominent Turkish leaders, while France and Germany have halted arms sales.
We cannot go now and blame and put all the blames on Turkey because they want to clear this area. We didn't see Turkey against the Kurds as a population. Turkey is against a specific group within the Kurdish people in Syria whom are targeting Turkey and Turkey security.
Ankara says the YPG is a terrorist offshoot of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, which has been waging an insurgency against the Turkish state since 1984. Chaos in areas targeted in the week-long Turkish assault has already led to the escape of around 800 foreign women and children linked to ISIS from a Kurdish-run camp, according to Kurdish authorities.
They have been trying to solve this issue now for more than a year with the United States to create the safe zone, to get the threat away from their border, and the threat represented in very simple groups. The YPG and PYD, which is a branch of the PKK, which is a declared terrorist organization in the US, in EU, in Turkey, everywhere. We are not against the Kurds who have hope for self-determination, but this should come through a proper political process.
Disinformation. What do you want to know?
35 foreigners were killed and 4 others injured when a bus collided with another heavy vehicle near the Muslim city of Medina, according to Saudi state media. The accident on Wednesday evening involved a collision between a private chartered bus with a heavy vehicle near the western city, according to a spokesman for Medina police and according to the official Saudi press agency. Now, those involved were Arab and Asian pilgrims traveling from Medina to Mecca, according to local media, which carried pictures of the bus engulfed in flames and with its windows blown out. The injured have been transferred to Al-Hamna Hospital, SPA added. Authorities have launched an investigation, or SPA added, authorities have launched an investigation. The Okaz newspaper said that the victims were expatriates who lived in the kingdom and who were performing the Umrah, the lesser pilgrimage to the Muslim places, which can be undertaken year-round. Now, this year, some 2.5 million traveled to Saudi Arabia from across the world in August to take part in this annual Hajj pilgrimage. A magnitude 5.4 quake struck under the Pacific east of Taiwan on Thursday evening, but most of the island, except the southern end, felt the tremor, according to Taiwan's Weather or Central Weather Bureau. Now, the temblor struck at 7:44 p.m., 16.5 kilometers under the ocean and 83.6 kilometers east of the Hualien County Government Building. And we will update you as we get information from the earthquake. Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
Mga kamag-anak, kaibigan at kababayan po namin sa Middle East and North Africa, masayang balita ang hatid po namin sa inyo. Ang Net25 ay makakasama nyo na sa inyong mga tahanan. Mapapanood nyo na ang inyong mga paboritong programa sa pamamagitan ng OSN, ang pinakamalaking entertainment network sa buong rehiyon. Sa Channel 725, maihahatid na namin sa inyo ang mga pangunahing balita at mahahalagang impormasyon. Kaya makisaya, makisalo tuwing umaga at panoorin ang mga programa ng mga hinahangaang celebrities and OPM artists, same day as the Philippines. You can also watch Net25 live and on demand anytime, anywhere on any mobile device on OSN Play. Kaya tawag na sa OSN to learn more on how to get Net25. Sa Net 25 on OSN, siguradong at home ka dito.
The Department of Energy said power situation in Mindanao is now back to normal after the 6.3 magnitude earthquake that hit the area of Tulunan, North Cotabato around 7:37 p.m. on Wednesday. DOE officials had an emergency meeting with members of the Task Force on Energy Resiliency or TIFR around 8:30 a.m. Thursday to be updated on the situation. In an advisory, the DOE said the National Electrification Administration continues to coordinate with the concerned distribution utilities, electric cooperatives for the status of their facilities. The National Grid Corporation of the Philippines has mobilized its line personnel to conduct line assessments and restorations if needed, it added. Unit 2 of the Mindanao Geothermal Power Plant has been restored around 3:13 a.m. after it tripped along with Unit 1 at around 7:37 p.m. Wednesday following the earthquake. The advisory also said the power transmission backbone in Mindanao remains intact. As of 11:40 p.m. last night, there have been no reports of damaged transmission facilities or high voltage equipment in South and North Cotabato. In terms of power distribution, the advisory also said the operation of 6 electric cooperatives that experienced interruption Wednesday night is now back to normal. Qatar announced plans to scrap controversial rules that require some workers to obtain permits to leave the country and block certain employees from changing companies without employers' permission. Qatar has made a series of reforms to its employment regulations since being selected to host the 2022 World Cup, which set motion a vast construction program employing foreign workers. Rights groups have long said the system fuels abuses. Last year, the exit visa requirement was dropped for the majority of workers, but the authorities are now extending that to the remainder, including domestic staff and employees of government bodies, including Qatar Airways.
For the first time, we have in the region, we have the minimum wage law, which will govern the law to have a minimum wage with penalties on not using or not conforming announcements. The other one is the abolishment, the total abolishment of all the exit permits from the other sectors. Before we implemented it only on the private sector. Now it is all inclusive of the government sector and all other sectors in the country. For Qatar, it is very important because we are looking at, at Qatar to be an attractive place for investors, for the skilled workers, to have productive community of good mix of local and expat.
Some 2 million foreign workers in Qatar work in Qatar, many employed directly or indirectly on vast infrastructure projects for the 2022 World Cup. In February, the gas-rich Gulf state said it was committed to labor reforms following an Amnesty International report that it was failing to stop widespread abuse of workers. Doha said it was on course to deliver lasting change after the rights group said it was running out of time to implement the reforms before the football contest. The ILO praised Qatar for this latest sweeping reforms, and they voiced hope that other countries with similar systems would follow suit.
With these announcements, we can officially announce the abolishment of kafala. And that is huge news for the millions of workers that are here, for the state of Qatar, and for our partnership between the ILO and the state of Qatar, the workers and employers. Well, for us, it's been long overdue. It still exists in many other countries, and we're hoping that other countries will also follow suit and fully abolish kafala because it's not in line with international standards.
Meanwhile, the sterling soared to within a whisker of $1.30, striking 5-month peaks after the European Union reached a draft Brexit withdrawal deal with London. The pound quickly rose more than 1% to $1.2990 before profit-taking set in. The euro slid to 85.76 pence as the news flashed across traders' screens. The British capital's benchmark FTSE 100 shares index, meanwhile, accelerated gains to stand 0.6% higher compared with Wednesday's closing level. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will still have to take the accord to a skeptical UK Parliament for its backing on Saturday, and it's unclear how many of his Conservative MPs will back the deal and if the opposition could vote it down or attempt to force a fresh referendum to approve or reject it. Meanwhile, General Motors and the United Auto Workers announced a tentative labor agreement that could end a month-long strike that has paralyzed the auto giant. The UAW-GM National Council, which includes local union chapters, will convene on Thursday local time to consider the agreement struck between the GM and UAW leadership, according to the union in a statement. Neither the UAW nor GM released details of the tentative deal that would end the strike that has now dragged into its 5th week, with mounting costs for both the company and the workers. GM said on the eve of the strike that its offer included more than $7 billion in investment to support more than 5,400 jobs. It also said it would pay a ratification bonus of $8,000 per worker. Nearly 50,000 hourly workers have been on strike since September 16. The UAW-GM negotiations have focused on job security, health benefits, and a quicker transition to permanent worker status for temporary workers who are paid less. The talks have been complicated by anger at GM after it effectively shuttered 5 plants in North America last year in a cost-cutting move that the union has argued violated the prior agreement. The strike has also come during a slowing car market after a banner run in the years after the Great Recession. Now, the International Monetary Fund sees the global economy in a synchronized downswing, and financial markets need to act now to head off the growing risk, according to the fund's financial counselor Tobias Adrian at the launch of the Global Financial Stability Report in Washington. Take a look.
Loose financial conditions have encouraged investors to take more risks in a quest to achieve their return targets. Valuations appear stretched in some important markets, including equity and credit markets in both emerging and frontier as well as advanced economies. As a result of easier financial conditions and stretched asset valuations, vulnerabilities have continued to intensify, putting growth at risk in the medium term. The search for yield among institutional investors, such as insurance companies, asset managers, and pension funds, has led them to take on riskier and less liquid securities. These exposures may act as amplifiers to shocks. In addition, corporations are taking on more debt, and their ability to service that debt is weakening. In the event of a material economic slowdown, the prospects would be sobering. Debt owed by firms unable to cover interest expenses with earnings, which we refer to as corporate debt at risk, could rise to $19 trillion in a scenario that is just half as severe as the global financial crisis.
Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund's Director of Fiscal Affairs Department, Victor Gaspar, is warning that a synchronized downturn in global growth may mean countries need to be prepared for coordinated action.
The global economy is in a synchronized slowdown. Risks are on the downside. Large economies should be prepared to engage in concerted action. Our analysis finds that in case of major, enduring shocks to the global economy, coordinated multilateral action holds the key to effectiveness. Low interest rates cannot be allowed to feed complacency. In most countries around the world, public debt ratios and interest payments burdens are on the rise. Fiscal policy should be conducted in the context of a medium-term framework. Otherwise, as it happened too many times in the past, overborrowing may be followed by investors' panic and financial markets disruptions. Policymakers must act now to curb global warming. The window of opportunity is closing fast. Countries' pledges for the Paris agreements are insufficient. Finance ministers must fully engage as carbon tax takes the center of mitigation efforts. The Fiscal Monitor argues that carbon taxation should be the centerpiece of mitigation efforts. Carbon pricing provides incentives to reduce energy consumption, to move towards clean forms of energy and move away from coal and other polluting fossil fuels. At the same time, the revenues from carbon taxation can be used to give money back to the people, compensate affected communities, finance public infrastructure, and reduce taxation on labor and capital.
The Universal Studios amusement park under construction in Beijing will admit visitors without a ticket, thanks to cameras that will scan their faces to determine if they've paid for entry. The technology is part of a host of services owned by Chinese internet giant Alibaba that will be integrated into Universal's park. Inside the park, facial recognition cameras linked to Alibaba's Alipay electronic payment platform will allow visitors to open storage lockers, pay for meals, and join express queues for rides. Facial recognition technology is gaining traction across China, where it's being used for everything from supermarket checkouts to surveillance. While researchers have warned of the privacy risks associated with gathering facial recognition data, consumers have widely embraced the technology.
There is no more seamless way to enjoy what we're building and using the Alibaba technology.
The company's Alipay app is widely used in China alongside rival WeChat Pay as an alternative to cash. Universal's Beijing Park, which will feature characters from Hollywood blockbusters like Harry Potter and Kung Fu Panda, was first announced in 2014 after receiving approval from China's top economic planner, the National Development and Reform Commission. The construction is underway in the Chinese capital's Tongzhou suburban district, and the park is expected to open its gates in 2021. Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
I am teacher Sally, and this is Kid Kwento, one of Net25 Kids' online shows. Kid Kwento is now on TV. You can watch us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4 to 4:30 p.m. Also watch Anong Sa Inyo with Ate DJ every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 to 4:30 p.m. Sa Kid Kwento, ang aming motto ay, let's all read to succeed! Hooray! Kita-kita tayo ha! Bye-bye!
Hi guys, I'm Marie Francisco here at the Shoe Museum in Marikina in the Philippines, reminding you to watch Digital News every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. And I am 1 for 25.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
The global cancer burden is expected to spiral from just over 18 million last year to 29 million by 2040, according to the latest edition of the Cancer Atlas, launched on Wednesday by a UN-backed agency that researches the disease. The Atlas is an illustrated guide to the diversity of cancer, which is a leading cause of premature death in every country in the world. It highlights global variations in the prevalence of key risk factors for cancer, as well as geographical variance in cancer occurrence and how countries are taking action. For example, although tobacco use remains the main causes of cancer in most high-income countries, legislation such as bans on smoking in public places are helping to protect around 1.5 billion people worldwide. Many of the known risk factors for cancer can be prevented, according to the authors. Besides tobacco use, these include infectious agents such as the human papillomavirus or HPV, unhealthy diet, excess body weight, physical inactivity, and alcohol consumption. Eating food high in starch, sugar, fats, and salt, combined with a sedentary lifestyle, is a recipe for soaring global obesity rates, even in countries where many still suffer from hunger. This year's World Food Day, with the theme "Our Actions Are Our Future," Healthy Diets for a #Zero Hunger World, takes place in the context of rising global hunger, but also increasing overweight and obesity. Take a look.
Hunger and malnutrition will be major barriers to achieve the SDGs by 2030 if we do not act now. We need stronger policies and political commitment. We need to invest in nutrition, and for nutrition we need to work hand in hand, build a healthy and sustainable food system.
The shift away from seasonal, mainly plant-based and fiber-rich food has occurred in recent decades as a result of globalization, urbanization, and growth in income, says the FAO, as busy consumers in urban areas find less time to cook at home and rely increasingly on fast food outlets, street food vendors, and takeaway meals, as well as impacting health. The way that food is currently consumed and produced is having a significant effect on climate change, according to Mr. Antonio Gutierrez. UN Chief Antonio Gutierrez announced that he hopes to convene a major food system summit in 2021 as part of the decade of action to deliver the SDGs.
It is unacceptable that hunger is on the rise at a time when the world wastes more than 1 billion tons of food every year. It is time to change how we produce and consume, including to reduce greenhouse emissions. Transforming food systems is crucial for delivering all the Sustainable Development Goals.
Meanwhile, David Beasley, Executive Director of the World Food Program, for his part echoed the call to end food waste and urged individuals around the world to join WFP's campaign to #StopTheWaste.
We have failed humanity. In any given culture, on any given continent, around the world, that is starving to death. And when every 5 seconds a child dies, we have failed humanity. Today, only 1 out of 9. But to that 1 out of 9 that have left behind, we have more work to do. We cannot desert the least of these. We cannot desert those who are just like us, those who have hopes and dreams.
Sad news in sports. American boxer Patrick Day died after suffering a serious brain injury during his knockout defeat to Charles Conwell last weekend, according to promoter Lou DiBella in a statement. The 27-year-old super welterweight had undergone emergency surgery after being knocked out by Conwell on Saturday at Chicago's Wintrust Arena. Day, who had been in a coma following surgery at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, died surrounded by family and friends. The American fighter had been carried unconscious from the ring on a stretcher on Saturday following his 10th round knockout. Conwell, a 2016 American Olympian, dropped Day in the 4th and 8th rounds and then landed a right hand in the 10th, which caused Day to stumble. Seconds later, Conwell rocked Day with a massive left hook that resulted in Day falling backwards and his head bouncing off the canvas. Referee Celestina Ruiz called off the fight at 1 minute, 46 seconds of the round. Day lay on the canvas for several minutes receiving medical treatment before being removed from the ring. Day is at least the 3rd boxer to die from injuries sustained in the ring this year. Argentine boxer Hugo Santillan died in July following a bout in San Nicolas, just north of Buenos Aires. Santillan's death came just 2 days after Russian fighter Maxim Dadashev died from brain injury suffered in a fight in Maryland. In his statement on Wednesday, DiBella said he hoped Day's death would prompt U.S. authorities to adopt tougher safety standards. More sports news from Ben Bernaldez. Ben?
The International Athletics Association Federation, or IAAF, and the International Swimming Federation, or FINA, have certified the new Clark City Athletics Stadium and Aquatic Center in Capas Tarlac as Class 1 facilities for the hosting of the 30th Southeast Asian Games from November 30th to December 11 this year. The certification of the NCC sports facilities was announced on Wednesday in a press conference attended by House of Representatives Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano, Senator Bongo, Bases Conversion Development Authority CEO and President Vince Dizon, Philippine Olympic Committee POC President Bambol Tolentino, and Philippine Sports Commission PSC Commissioner Ramon Fernandez and Arnold Agustin. The world-class sports facilities where the athletics and aquatics in the SEA Games will be held were constructed in 18 months. With the construction of the Class 1 venues, Goss said the Philippines is ready to produce more world-class talents who can follow the footsteps of world champions Carlos Yulo of gymnastics, Nesty Petesio of boxing, and Olympic qualifier E.J. Obiena of athletics. The senator, along with the other guests, also witnessed the groundbreaking ceremony of the Philippine National High School for Sports that is expected to be completed by 2021. The school will be open to students who aspire to develop their skills as an athlete. In other sports story, Barcelona captain Lionel Messi received his 6th golden shoe as the top scorer in the European League on Wednesday. Messi won the trophy for a 3rd straight year after scoring 36 goals, 3 more than his closest challenger Kylian Mbappe of Paris Saint-Germain. Messi's son, Thiago and Mateo, presented their father with the trophy supervised by his wife, Antonella Roccuzzo, and watched by teammates including Luis Suarez and Jordi Alba.
Están acá Luis y Jordi, que son dos grandes culpables de que yo hoy pueda recibir un año más este premio. Como siempre digo que sin mi equipo, mis compañeros, nunca hubiera podido conseguir ni siquiera uno. Esto es parte de todo. Si bien me lo terminan entregando a mí, es un reconocimiento para todo el vestuario, así que...
These are the stories for EN Sports. I'm Ben Bernaldez and I'm 1 with 25.
Thank you, Ben, and that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again tomorrow evening. From all of us here at Eagle News, I'm Alma Angeles, always 1 with 25.